The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
At any rate, welcome, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. It's wonderful to see so many of you here, new faces, and I won't say old faces, but people I know. Well, okay, old faces. How many of you have never been to a Death with Dignity-Albany program before? Oh, wow, that's great. Wonderful. Well, I hope that you will find the program interesting and sign up to be on our email list, which is how we send out notifications for programs and updates on legislation and so forth. So we'd love to add you to our list. Just let me tell you a little bit about Death with Dignity Albany. As of this month, we are 3 years old. And we are 660 people strong, which is a pretty good indication of the interest in this community and talking about end-of-life issues and supporting end-of-life choices for legislation. So that's exciting. Death with Dignity Albany's mission is to build a community where people can learn about and talk about a very broad spectrum of end-of-life issues. And we also advocate for the passage of legislation in New York to allow medical aid in dying. And after our main speakers presenting the topic of today, we're going to hear from our advocacy coordinator, Amanda Kavanaugh, because we have some pretty exciting news in terms of the progress of legislation for medical aid in dying. So hopefully you can stay long enough that you can hear from Amanda, but we will still end at 2 as promised. And today, we're going to hear about how to get your affairs in order. What about the ducks? You know the line? Get your ducks in a row, right. I think I already just stole Linda's thunder. I didn't mean to do that. So first, we're going to hear from Linda Schrager. Then we'll take questions for her. Then we're going to hear from Dorothee Racette. We'll take questions from her, and then we'll hear from Amanda Kavanaugh. So that's how this is going to be running. So now, our second speaker, Dorothee Racette. Dorothee is a productivity specialist and time management coach offering organizing solutions in the Capital Region. She owns and runs Take Back My Day, which she founded after running a successful small business for 25 years. In her new career, she helps people overcome procrastination and find time to live the life they want. And Dorothee's interest in data organizing was spawned by a computer crash she was unprepared for and helping her father supplement his will with electronic information. So let me introduce and welcome Dorothee Racette.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see so many of you today. Let me just organize my things here. Hey, so what I want to talk with you about this afternoon is the aspect of estate planning that is often overlooked. Our generation did not grow up with digital media at all. When I started paying bills, everything was paper-based. I'm sure that was the same for you. But now, increasingly, we're paying bills online. We have automatic debits. We have credit cards. We have email. We have social media accounts. We shop online. And all of that is associated with passwords, with electronic information. So There's this mix probably for the older generation, probably partly still paper-based, partly electronic, but when we go another generation down the line, people are doing almost exclusive digital transactions. So that's what I want to talk with you about this afternoon, how to handle that as part of preparing your estate. Digital information, in a way, is kind of the new frontier in organizing. What Linda was just talking about was the physical aspect of your home. But this digital aspect is just as important. It may not take up as much space in your home, but it's right there. We just started talking about some of you scanning in photos. Well, what do you do with them? If someone were to look at those photos 10, 20 years from now, would they know who's shown on the photo? Have you tagged them? Have you done anything with them to make them the kind of heritage that you would like to pass on? Or is it just going to be another gig of data that someone will just go, oh, I have no idea what to do with this? So digital information is the new frontier. I'm going to start by defining for you what I mean when I talk about digital assets. The definition is simply any information stored in binary format. So that could be things you store on your computer. Our smart devices are getting smarter and smarter. They have much more data storage now. So we're storing stuff. We're scanning. We're saving. We have years worth of email. We have so much stuff that is now not only on a computer, but also spread across different devices. In some cases, not linked. So what's on my iPad may not be linked to what's on my computer. And it may use different passwords, and all of that makes it less accessible, also less organized and less structured. Then somebody already brought this word up, the cloud. That's the data storage that's not actually on a physical device, but it's somewhere on a server, who knows where. That is another aspect of data management now. And then we have, of course, much more than text. We have images, we have scanned items, we have content files, records, music, photos, financial information, increasingly assets such as websites. People have blogs, they have social media accounts, they have connections, networks, all of that. So that is a host of new problems that we're just beginning to grapple with. How are we going to pass this on? What is a structured way to let somebody have it without making it more difficult for the people that are setting out to deal with our estate? A simple example is, this is a regular modern phone. I set up a 4-digit code to access it, but I haven't let anybody know what that code is. So they're going to be hard pressed to get even in my phone if something is to happen, right? So that's where it starts. And it gets more complicated from there, of course, because I'm sure you all have passwords set up, and some of them may be still the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but others may not be, and that's when it gets more complicated. So 3 points I want to address with you this afternoon. I want to talk about authorizing a fiduciary to handle your digital assets. I want to talk about password management, and I will share a few sites with you for best practices for digital asset record keeping. What's a good way to do that, and how can you pass that on to those who come after you? Let's start with a quick exercise. I want you to just think of your bank accounts and your credit card accounts. I'm putting that in the plural because I'm assuming you have more than one bank account and more than one credit card. That's the typical scenario. If you have only one of each, then think of that. But think of, in a typical month, what kind of transactions, especially the automated ones, where you go, okay, that's just debited. Your phone bill, National Grid, stuff that you've automated. Think of that. and try to guess how many of those transactions are there for you or your family. Do you want to guess how many monthly regular transactions of that kind you may have? Quite a few, right? Yeah. Have you told anyone about those? If you're responsible for setting them up, does anyone else even know? Where does your Social Security get deposited to? Which bank account is used to pay your credit card bills? So that's a prime example of, that's the dilemma we're now facing. Because all of that used to be, okay, the bill came in, so your executor could just go, okay, here's the phone bill. Now I know this was now I can cancel the phone. But they can't cancel what they don't know is there. So all of that is more hidden, it's more in the background, and you need to somehow create a record of those transactions. So digital transactions, for those who aren't intimately familiar with them, are invisible, they're complex, and they're fully automated. And even, that's happened to me, and maybe to you as well, I've forgotten some of them. And I thought, what kind of debit is that on my card? Why is it $10 going out? Oh yeah, I signed up for something, and now I don't even know what that was anymore. So if I don't know, how is someone else supposed to know? So the new recommendation is that you assign somebody who will take care of just the digital aspect of your estate, particularly if you have appointed someone to execute your will who may be your age, maybe a sister, a brother, somebody of your generation who is of a great heart and will happily handle your estate, but may not be as savvy with digital and online things as you'd like that to be. So maybe you need to consider a second person, someone who is able, willing, can be trusted enough to handle the digital or online portion of your estate. And again, we were talking earlier about having those conversations. The time to have those conversations is when you can still describe those transactions to somebody, when you're not stressed, when you are quiet and calm enough to describe them all, write them down, and show somebody, here's what this is, here's the access to my phone, here's the code to get into my computer. And have that person maybe walk through the directories in your computer with you or understand what's involved. Another recommendation is, and I think that makes a lot of sense, to put the name of this person with your will. So the traditional executor has an assistant, someone to turn to help with those digital transactions. So someone who's already authorized. The fiduciary would be someone who has the power of attorney and is authorized to close online accounts, for example. There are different procedures for, say, how many of you have a Facebook account? Are you aware what happens with your Facebook account once you pass on? It stays forever, yes. It doesn't just go away, it stays there unless somebody on your behalf says, this person passed away, I would like to close this account. Why does it matter? I mean, it's going to obviously not have any more postings on it. Sometimes it does, and it sends you birthday announcements, yes. The other more dangerous aspect is, of course, you know, when someone passes, people post messages, rest in peace, wonderful person, we loved you. But your friends aren't the only people who see this. There could also be folks that go, oh, she passed on, so now I can break into her apartment. There's all kinds of cyber crime going on. Now would be the time to take advantage. And that is certainly happening. So there are many good reasons to handle those accounts to make sure that they get closed down properly. And someone who you have authorized can then go contact Facebook. I think the account has to stay open for a certain time, but then Facebook will close it. So, yes?
There's actually a place on Facebook now where you can designate a legacy designee, and you give the name and contact information, so that authorizes them to do that.
Okay, so Facebook has a place, a legacy designation where you can enter who that person will be, who is allowed to close and end your Facebook account on your behalf. But that's just one site, right? If you have multiple social media accounts, I don't know if you do, but Facebook just happens to be the most popular at the moment. It was MySpace 10 years ago, so who knows what happened with those accounts. It's just something to think about. We can't solve all of that here, but maybe you just haven't given this aspect a lot of thought yet, and I would encourage you to do that. So somebody has to handle those invisible and complex things, particularly those that have no paper record. Someone needs to know what those transactions are. So a good idea would be to talk with the lawyer who's already set up your will to see what they're recommending, what they might want to file maybe with the will. If you have a list of passwords that will stay the same and you haven't changed them, print them out. So the handout that went around that I asked you to share has some suggestions of what kind of information should you write down. And maybe file that right with your will. So at least it's in some place that presumably is secure enough where you can be sure that it's not going to fall into the wrong hands. What may happen, here's some scenarios that I have heard about from a colleague who wrote a book about this whole complex problem. She said, in some cases, automated debits just continue because no one has canceled them. No one knew that they were going on, so how can you cancel what you don't know is existing? Then cybercrime is another big issue. There are people literally trolling the web to figure out who may have passed on and how they might take advantage of that. Insurance policies, savings accounts, all kinds of balances, shopping accounts, and then websites. That's a brand new one. If you own a website for whatever reason, then someone has to close that down. It's in your name. The domain is owned by your estate, and it has to be closed down. Other intellectual property, if you have patents, if you have inventions, blogs, anything, has to be properly wrapped up. So your digital executor should be a person who has the proper computer knowledge, who stays on top of those matters, who has the time, the understanding, the commitment to help out when you pass and to take care of all those digital aspects. And a person who you trust enough to have full access to whatever is on your computer. So how can you let your fiduciary know what to look for? That leads us to the second point, the password management. And you all heard there's so many cases recently of hacking. You've probably been involved, at least in one instance. If you don't think you have, then you would be a person who's never shopped online or bought a house or opened a bank account, because all this data was with Equifax, the big company that kept all of our data. They had an enormous breach last year where literally millions and millions of data records got stolen and hacked, and we don't really know yet what happened with this information. Nothing boom big has happened yet, but it was the largest theft of composite data, which means it's data, not just your name and your email address maybe, but it was the past homes you owned, your mother's name, your telephone number, your anything, your mortgage, all of that. They keep that together in big data sets, and that is what got stolen. Now, why that is important for passwords is many people tend to combine familiar information. Like an old street address is their favorite password. That sounds great. Yeah, that's a really good password usually. But when somebody has access to this composite data, then it's an easy guess to just go through all your past street addresses to go, okay, maybe that was her password. Maybe she used that. So I typically use a combination of a pet name and an old street address, and I thought, oh my God, now that's not safe either, and I have to change that. So passwords, of course, are good things. Passwords properly used are good. There have been some recommendations, and they keep changing about what is a good password. When you open a new account online now, I'm sure the website is now prompting you that a 4-digit, 4-character password is too short because it's too easy to get and guess. So the longer the better. There was recommendations for a while, and Linda and I talked about that, to make it as outlandish as possible, with lots of strange characters and numbers and underscores and all that in it. The trouble with that is, of course, you can't remember them. So next time you want to go in, you go, oh, what was that again? So the new recommendation is now to make the password as long as possible and as personal as possible, something you can be sure to remember, but make it long. So maybe add something of significance to you, some favorite quote, something that means something to you. And what was that joke, Bonnie? We had, beef stew is not good because it's not stroganoff, right? But beef stew, if that means something to you, you had a favorite family recipe. So that would be a good password, actually. Something, it should not be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ever, ever, ever. It should not be admin. It should never be the default that first pops up when you install something new, or you don't ever do that. Always personalize the passwords. And then the trick is, of course, how are you going to remember what passwords you use? So as soon as you set up a password, keep a record of it. And not on a piece of paper that goes in the junk drawer, but in one place. Do you have such a place where all your passwords are together? It can be a piece of paper, that's no problem. A Rolodex works well. It can be an electronic document, which has the downside that if you can't access your computer, then you can't access that thing either. So it's good to have it outside of your computer. And always a good idea too to let someone else know, here's where those passwords are. So increasingly there are sites where you can put all that information together as a larger file, as a book almost, or as an online, they call it a vault, something where you log in securely and all your information is together and can also be shared with others. So I'm going to give you a few sites that, I'm not endorsing them, I'm just giving you some sites, some websites that I find helpful. And again, if you can't catch this information now, do email me, please. I'll be happy to send you those websites. There was supposed to be a PowerPoint, and we didn't. There was some technical issue with it. So get in touch if you'd like any of those websites. I'll be happy to send them to you. So the one that I use now for managing all of my passwords is called LastPass. But there are many others, so I'm not going to tell you you must use that one. It's just a suggestion. If you have a lot of passwords, and that means maybe more than 5, then it'd be a good idea to store them in a place where you can get back at them.
Is that .org or .com?
It's a .com, lastpass.com.
So a question, if somebody hacked your computer, would they then have access to that document with all your passwords on it?
Do you want to repeat that again, please?
I said if somebody hacked into your computer, wouldn't they have access to that document with all your passwords on it?
Exactly, yes. That is exactly the dilemma. Yes. So if you had the LastPass that I just talked about, that's actually encrypted. If somebody hacked my computer, they would not be able to get into that. Unless I put a Post-it note on my screen, that of course happens as well. So that's exactly the problem, and I think that is the issue that keeps so many people from dealing with this digital estate aspect. They're worried that they're actually providing fodder for those hackers and making it easier to access. So that's what you need to determine individually with the person that is handling your estate preparation, or the person that you've appointed to be your fiduciary. Talk about where is a safe spot to keep this information. If you have a vault, like the LastPass that I talked about, then how can someone else access it? There's a new aspect to it. You can actually share it. They have now a family plan, so the whole family can reach into this vault, and you can, for example, we have my mother-in-law is suffering from Alzheimer's disease, and so we had to scramble to get this information before she forgot, and it's in this vault. If you always use the same password to log into everything you do, stop. Find different passwords, because that makes it super easy to get at your stuff. So if Amazon and your bank and everything has 1, 2, 3, I love my dog or something, then do revise and revisit that. It is a bit of a long drawn out process. It's not fun to change your password, but it's a lot less fun to get hacked and have your identity stolen. So if there's anything that I would urge you to do this afternoon, is to take a look at your passwords and see if you have them securely recorded somewhere, and are they a good fit, and are they all the same or not. And does anyone know how to get into your computer? That used to be easy. You just switched it on and there it was. But now it has access codes, or the kids now have stuff where they put their hand on the screen so it identifies them. Be sure to let somebody know how to do that. So otherwise, all of that is kind of in vain. All your careful scanning and your wonderful data management won't be much good if they can't open it. Good. That brings me to my third point, best practices for digital asset record keeping. So we talked about the accounts. What I'm passing around, the handout tells you what kind of information might you need to consider? What should be in that list of things you need to share securely with others? So that'd be your bank accounts, your credit cards, anything that people may not even know you had. A little conversation blog or something that you need to share with others and make sure that it can be stopped. Money flows are particularly important. Where is your money flowing? And give somebody a map, if necessary, of where is... That can be quite a complex web once you start mapping it out. I looked at it, and so what I did is I have only one account now that gets debited for the automatic debits. Before it was several accounts, because just I had this credit card handy when I set it up, and it was just happening organically that way. And now I've made sure that all the automatic debits are in a single account, and it's not all over the place. So that's helpful too. Then somebody would just have to access that one account and they would see all the debits. Here are a few ways to share that information. You can have it in the vault that I mentioned. You can have it on a USB stick, maybe, that you can give somebody. That way, the concern you mentioned, that somebody might hack your computer, if you had it on a USB stick and you label the USB stick and said, don't save anything else on this, this is my passwords. Put it in a spot where you remember where it is.
Don't mark it as password.
Yes, exactly. Don't mark it as passwords. But mark it as important, or stick it in with your passport, someplace where you really can be sure you'll find it. Here's another good website that I'll share with you. It's called Everplans, with an S at the end, Everplans. They have excellent articles, good information on exactly this topic, on how do you deal with your digital asset. Everplans. That's also .com. Yes?
So I started a Dropbox file that can be shared with others. What do you think of saving a document like this and sharing it in the cloud like Dropbox with somebody? There's risks and there's benefits.
Yes. Well, Dropbox is not known for its security, so I would not choose Dropbox for doing that. It's not a super secure site.
So what would you suggest instead?
I would suggest a program called Evernote, which is free. There's a free version to it where you can store things in different formats. I would consider that more secure than Dropbox. So Everplans, that's the site where you can read more about different aspects of digital management. LastPass was the password management program I mentioned to you. There's also a site called GYST. Get your sh together. GYST. It was started by a woman whose husband had a bicycle accident, and he had been the person who handled everything. He was in his 30s, so nobody expected anything to happen. And she found herself completely helpless because he had been very much a digital manager, and he had done everything online, and she had not dealt with any of that. And she was clueless. And she said she felt so helpless and stupid, too, for not knowing her own accounts and her own household affairs. So she started this website, and it's excellent. Yes, ma'am. So the logo, or the motto for the everplans.com website I told you about is leave a legacy, not a mess. I like that a lot. So going back to the Dropbox question and the Evernote question, some lawyers are beginning to create those shared files directly with their clients. It's worth asking your lawyer about it. You know, if they're not coming to you and saying we need to update things, then maybe contact them. Your will's already on file, then contact your estate lawyer and say, I really need to talk with you about this digital aspect. If we haven't handled this already, how do you handle it? What would you recommend? So, what else do I have here? Oh, there's one more resource I can recommend to you. It's called The Big Book of Everything. And he means it. This guy put together a large project, The Big Book of Everything.
This is a website?
Yes. So when you Google it, you're sure to find it. It is a website, but he encourages you to print it out, and it is designed to be done in small steps, so it's not overwhelming, because that's another aspect that Linda also talked about is you go, I know I have to do this, but where do I start? What do I do? And it gets so overwhelming that you end up not doing anything at all. So just maybe accessing some of those resources that I suggested to you may be a good step to get you motivated and tackle this. So once again, I handed out this suggested list of resources. There's, of course, much more that may apply to you personally, whatever your situation is. So it's just a start, it's just an idea of how you might want to record that. I'm happy to share that file with you. Shoot me an email if you have any other questions. And I will encourage all of you to leave a legacy and not a mess. Do you have any questions? Yes.
I have a comment. You have a will, you name an executor, you have a power of attorney, you give someone your power of attorney. As far as accessing digital assets, not good enough anymore. You really have to have specific, detailed language in the documents themselves in order to authorize that person to act on your behalf and to have access to your digital assets.
Okay. Can you elaborate that for us, please? I know you are an estate lawyer, so here's the source.
And so a couple of years ago, I thought, well, you have an executor,
We can't hear you.
Okay. Yes. We have someone here who really understands estate law. So what Mike was just sharing was that the language in the will needs to be updated. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, go have the mic.
An executor.
Take the mic.
So not long ago, I figured that just having an executor name in the will or power of attorney would give those people the right to get your digital assets and do anything else connected with your affairs. Not so. You have to give them specific and quite detailed language in your power of attorney document and in your will itself, specifically authorizing them to be able to access your digital assets. And there's a very complicated definition of digital assets in the New York law, and you read it 5 times and you still don't know what the heck it says the other time. But without that in there, you're going to have problems down the road.
So the recommendation would certainly be then to get in touch with your estate lawyer. If you haven't looked at your will for a few years, get in touch, find out what the new legal situation is and what language you may need to add or amend in your will to make sure that the digital aspect is covered. Other questions? Yes?
I'm not terribly digitally oriented. So what I've done, and I may continue doing is...
I'm going to
sorry.
repeat. So,
she'll repeat it. I continue getting paper printouts from my financial dealings, and I keep them for at least a couple of years so that I can look at that for myself without going and spreading it all over the internet when I don't know what I'm doing on the internet.
okay, so the recommendation is to insist on continued paper records instead of a lot of companies are pushing you to go and they're saying, oh, it's green and it saves trees and all of that. What it does is it's much easier for them. It has nothing to do with trees. So insist on those paper records. You're paying for them anyway. You're a customer at the company, so they will send you those if that's helpful for you to keep things straight. Other comments or questions? Yes?
I just have a comment about securing passwords. A friend of mine gave me a really great idea, and it's taking a favorite song and using the first line of the song, like the first initials of the first line of the song, uppercase, lowercase, and sprinkling in some dollar signs, percent signs, and stuff in between. And I can't remember always, but then I think of the song, and then I can muddle through. But
So the recommendation is to use the first line of a favorite song as your password, which would be in line with what I said earlier, that a longer password is better. You can probably...
Using the first initial of them and then sprinkling in like
Okay.
numbers and numbers. It makes it about 12
Okay, yeah. As long as it's something that you really know you're going to remember in any situation, you won't have to... And those dollar signs can sometimes be not in your favor because you don't know where you placed them or what you did. It's actually okay to just use a long password with a lot of characters in it. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Good, then we'll wrap it up. If you think of any more, then be in touch and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Yeah, certainly, yes.
In case you have cards to go on.
Okay, yes. So it's Dorothee, Dorothee, dot Racette, Racette, at gmail.com.
There are plenty of cards.
Good. Yeah. My cards are in the back. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dorothy. That was great. And thank you, Mike, for stepping in. And now I do want to give time to Amanda. Where are you, Amanda? Oh, right there. Amanda wears two hats. She is the advocacy coordinator for Death with Dignity-Albany, and she is also the campaign organizer for Compassion and Choices. And so she is our absolute resident expert on the state of legislation for medical aid in dying. So there are a couple of new developments that are very interesting, so I'll bring Amanda up here. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I promise not to keep you for very long. I know this program has been full of very helpful information, so I don't want to bog your minds down anymore. But I certainly want to keep you abreast of what's happening in New York State with the passage of medical aid in dying. Some things that folks may have heard me talk about lately are finally coming to fruition, so I want to make sure that you all know of that. The first one is that the Medical Society of the State of New York promised that they were going to survey their members last year at a House of Delegates meeting. And for the past year, on a weekly basis, I meet and talk with physicians and say, have you got the survey yet? What's going on? And we've been trying to track down the survey and figure out what the next steps are. Yesterday at 10:20 a.m., I got an email that finally told me the survey is out. So if you are a physician, if you know a physician, ask them to take the survey that the Medical Society put out on medical aid in dying. As we know, in states where the Medical Society has changed their opinion from being opposed to the legislation to being neutral, we have had great success in passing a law. So we're really hopeful that the survey results will lead us in a good direction. So that's the first and the most important thing that I can say at this very moment. Another important thing that I want to mention is that at the end of April, the governor has announced special elections. There are a number of open seats within the Assembly and the Senate. One of them being in the Rensselaer County area, Assemblyman Steve McLaughlin, sorry, totally lost me for a second. His seat is open. We would like to really do our best to get people that we know that are supportive of medical aid in dying in those seats. So if you are somebody who lives in a district with an open seat, please be sure to check into that. The next most important thing that I want to talk about very briefly is that some amendments were made to the Medical Aid in Dying Act over the past few months. The majority of the amendments were really minor and technical. They were changing a period to a comma or moving things around a little bit, but there were some things that we at Compassion Choices believe really make the bill stronger. And so I want everyone to sort of have an idea of what they are. And this is not, I'm not going to go into detail about every single one, but just a few that I would like to highlight. We were able to tighten the definition of terminal illness to ensure that eligible patients must have a terminal illness or condition that's incurable and irreversible and will likely result in death in 6 months or less. The amendment eliminates the arguable ambiguous language that a terminal illness is likely to be fatal with or without treatment. So you may have heard there was some arguments in the media going back and forth about, like, well, if somebody has diabetes, they could say that's a terminal illness. So we've really taken the lead here in New York and drawn out anything that could be used like that. Another thing that has been done is we've strengthened the provision requiring a mental health evaluation to require a referral to a mental health professional when an attending physician has any doubt about a patient's capacity to make an informed decision. So the language around the mental health evaluation is a little bit stricter, and I imagine in the future we'll see some changes about who is allowed to do the mental health evaluation. This, to me, is the most important amendment, and so I'm going to read that sort of word for word to you. But we've strengthened the language that the attending physician's responsibilities, requiring that the attending physician notify the patient requesting medical aid in dying, the restriction that no person other than the patient may administer the medication, the importance of informing the patient's family of their decision to use medical aid in dying, and not only of the feasible alternatives or additional treatment opportunities, including but not limited to palliative care and hospice care, but also the range of options appropriate to the patient, the prognosis, risks and benefits of the various options, and the patient's legal rights to comprehensive pain and symptom management at the end of life, and information regarding treatment options appropriate to the patient, including the prognosis, risks and benefits of various other treatment options. Just to note, the reason why that's so important is because some people think that the Hospice and Palliative Care Association, they're currently opposed to the legislation. We really want to get them to a good place, so we feel like by letting them know in the bill detail that a physician has to explain options about hospice and palliative care, we might have a better chance of getting them to become supporters or at least neutral. Yes?
Did you say the physician has to tell the family if they've given the prescription to the patient?
No. The doctor wouldn't tell the family. The doctor's just telling the person that's getting the prescription they should talk to their family about it, but it's not a requirement.
Did you say it was mandated the physician tell a person, or the person that's sick has to ask for it?
Oh, it's always, one of the first things in the bill is that the person has to voluntarily ask for it. It's not something that a physician can offer.
Now, this medical aid in dying, is it on the computer? It's a New York state law?
It's not a law currently. We're trying to get it passed.
So where would you access if you wanted to read it?
You can, if you do a bill search, you can find it. I have copies of the summary in the back too I can give you. And then a couple more amendments. Ensuring that both attending and consulting physician that are agreeing that the patient be able to use medical aid in dying have access to the mental health professional's written report. No matter which doctor actually makes the referral, both doctors will be able to see it. Clarifying that euthanasia would remain prohibited under New York state law. Sometimes we hear from people who are opposed that euthanasia or mercy killing or all these other things, so we made sure that those things will remain illegal. And we also added specific requirements to the provision regarding safe disposal of any unused medication. So we don't have to worry about medication getting in the wrong hands. It will be specific as to how. So those are some of the amendments, and like I said, they're much more lengthy, and I could certainly go over them if people have questions or send you a list of them, but those are the highlights. The other thing, co-sponsors for the bill have really been rising lately. We've seen a huge number increase. The number has doubled, and we're actually starting to see some senators sign on now. So if you have not met with your lawmaker and asked them to co-sponsor the bill, you certainly should. And the last thing two last things I want to talk about. One is that we're having a lobby day in Albany on April 23rd. We'll also be having a webinar training on April 9th. We want as many people in their yellow t-shirts there as possible. So if you're interested in signing up, my cards are in the back. Send me an email and I can send you detailed information. And the last thing I just wanted to mention is that we're talking about all of this estate planning and getting rid of things and getting your affairs in order. Compassionate Choices is a great resource for end-of-life planning, advanced care directives. Excuse me, and I left a book in the back called Your Life, Your Priorities, and that really goes over information about advanced care directives and that sort of thing. But if anybody has any questions, I'll stick around I want to make sure everyone gets out that wants to.
Hang on. Because we have so many new people here, I'm going to ask Amanda to just go back to step one and describe what the bill is that is pending in the New York State legislature.
Sure. So there is a bill in the Assembly sponsored by Assemblywoman Amy Paulin and a same as bill in the Senate sponsored by Senator Diane Savino. And the Medical Aid in Dying Act is modeled after the law that's been in Oregon for the last 20 years. And there's currently 7 jurisdictions that have a similar law. We have a law pending in New Jersey that we're hopeful will pass by the end of the year. And then we have the law that's pending here in New York. The bill would allow a terminally ill person, an adult, so 18 or over, that has the mental capacity to make a decision, so folks who have Alzheimer's or dementia do not qualify, the option to ask their doctor for a prescription that they would take or never take to have a peaceful passing. So people who use this law tend to be end-stage cancer patients, ALS patients, people who really are having a prolonged death experience that would like to have an ending to their suffering. It's an option for people. It's not required. It's not something a doctor, a pharmacist, or anyone else would ever need to prescribe if they didn't feel comfortable doing that. The situation's completely voluntary. If a person asks for it, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll get it. It also does not mean that they are required to take it. A person can change their mind at any point. It does need to be self-administered, so people who cannot take medication on their own wouldn't be able to qualify for medical aid in dying. And I think that one of the most important aspects of it is that in the 20 years that it's been legal in Oregon, less than 1,300 people have ever gotten and taken the medication. So when you think about how people die on a daily basis and how many people die, a number of 1,300 in 20 years is really minimal. But what does happen is that physicians have better end-of-life conversations with folks. They start to open up about what people want at the end of their life. They help with pain management and symptom management a little bit more. Hospice gets involved a little bit sooner. Patients who use medical aid in dying, 90% of them are on hospice, so they are getting the best end-of-life care they possibly can. And the peace of mind that people have by knowing that medical aid in dying is available is huge, and we hear about that from a lot of our patients who are suffering at the end of life. Was that good?
Great. That was good. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you to all of you who were here today. We hope to see you again April 3rd. And do check out our website. Thank you for coming.